Have you ever watched your own father point at you in a courtroom and call you a thief? While sitting under a roof, you secretly paid for month after month? 3 weeks ago, I walked into a courthouse as the parasitic daughter my dad blasted all over the internet, and walked out as the legal owner. He thought this was my public execution. He didn't know I'd brought 7 years of receipts and a deed with my name on it. My name is Valentina Gates. I am 33 years old, and the air in the Riverside County Courthouse parking lot smells like diesel fumes and cheap coffee. It is 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, and my public execution is scheduled to begin in less than an hour. I step out of my car, and the door clicks shut with a sound that feels too final, too hollow. The humidity of the late summer morning instantly clings to my skin, making the silk lining of my blazer feel sticky. Across the lot, I see them. He brought an audience, not just a few friends, but 2 full-size charter buses, the kind usually reserved for high school football teams. They are parked haphazardly, taking up a dozen spots. Men are pouring out of them, a sea of plaid flannel shirts, worn denim, and steel-toed work boots. They are my father's colleagues, his subcontractors, his drinking buddies. This is his army, and they are all looking right at me. They are laughing. I can hear the deep, rumbling sound of it from 50 yards away. They are pointing, raising their smartphones. The small red lights of recording cameras blink at me like hostile eyes in the morning glare. I do not need to hear what they are saying. I have been the subject of their jokes, the bookworm daughter, my entire life. But today is different. Today, I am not just the nerdy girl who ran from the sawdust. I am the villain. I force my feet to move, one heel clicking on the asphalt, and then the other. The sound is a weak defense against their noise. I walk toward the main entrance, a glass and steel monstrosity that reflects a distorted funhouse version of the scene. A lone woman in a gray suit, walking toward a wall of mocking men. The schedule is posted on a digital kiosk just inside the doors, flickering under the harsh fluorescent lights, and there, in sterile black letters, is the official record of my betrayal. Elias Gates, plaintiff. Verse, Valentina Gates, defendant. The charges are listed beneath: clinical and brutal, alleged financial exploitation and property fraud. My stomach does not just tighten. It clenches into a cold, hard knot. Fraud, exploitation. These are words from my world. The world of forensic accounting. Words I use to describe criminals. White-collar thieves, con artists. To see them attached to my name, opposite my father's, feels like a physical violation. It feels like gaslighting. Codified and filed with the county clerk. The lobby is already crowded, buzzing. The flannel army has started to filter in, stamping their boots on the marble floor as if to claim the territory. They smell of sawdust, sweat, and the cigarettes they just finished outside. Their voices echo in the high-ceilinged atrium, and I catch the whispers as I pass. That's her. That's the one who stole his house. Right out from under him, her own father. These damn millennials, no respect, think they're entitled to everything. This is gonna be good. Heard Elias is gonna let her have it. Hope they roast her. My kids would never pull a stunt like this. I keep my eyes fixed on the elevator bank, but I see them all. The contempt in their eyes is visceral. It is a thick, choking thing, and I am breathing it in. And then I see the cameras, not just phones, but a professional news camera with a bright light mounted on top. A small crew from the Riverside Daily Stream, our local online-only news source, is setting up near the security checkpoint. A reporter, a young man who looks thrilled to be here, is speaking animatedly into his microphone. It is a story shaking our community, a controversial case of alleged elder financial abuse, he says, his voice dripping with manufactured sincerity. A prominent local builder, Elias Gates, claims his own daughter has methodically defrauded him of his lifelong home. We are here today as Mr. Gates himself has invited the community to witness justice being served. He tipped them off. Of course he did. This was not just a lawsuit. It was a press conference. He did not just want the house. He wanted my reputation. He wanted to destroy the one thing I had built for myself, the one thing he could never understand or control, my career, my name. As if summoned by the reporter's words, the automatic doors slide open again, the sea of flannel parts, and this time it is not a suggestion, it is a show of respect, my father. Elias Gates strides into the lobby. He is not the man I saw last, the one drinking heavily in his dimming living room, drowning in debt. No, today he is a new man. He is wearing a dark blue suit, perfectly tailored, with a crisp white shirt and a power red tie. He looks like a captain of industry, a man in total control. He looks like the man he always wanted to be. Hanging on his arm, her expression a perfect, practiced mask of wifely concern, is Lena, his young wife, his second wife, the one who moved in 3 months after my mother, Claire, finally found the courage to leave. Lena, who is only 5 years older than I am, looks at the crowd with wide, innocent eyes, clutching Elias's bicep. She is playing the part of the supportive, terrified spouse perfectly. She catches my eye over the heads of the crowd, and for one fleeting, infinitesimal second, the mask slips. I see the look beneath, pure, unadulterated triumph. She is the one who found the lawyer. She is the one who fanned the flames. This is her masterpiece. My father spots me. His confident stride does not falter. He steers Lena directly toward me, the crowd parting for them like they are royalty, the news camera swiveling to capture the dramatic confrontation. He stops a few feet away, close enough for me to smell his expensive cologne, the kind I used to buy him for Christmas. He does not whisper, he projects, his voice booming with the practiced authority of a man who has run construction crews his entire life. He wants everyone to hear this. He wants the cameras to hear this. "Valentina," he says, his tone a grotesque parody of paternal disappointment. "There is still time to avoid this embarrassment. For both of us. Just tell them you made a mistake. Admit what you did. Sign the papers to give the house back to me, and we can make this all go away. It will be so much easier on you. Honey, just admit you were wrong." My blood runs cold, then hot. He is offering me a plea deal. Here, in the lobby, in front of an audience he assembled. He is treating this like a negotiation for a lumber shipment. The audacity of it, the sheer, narcissistic gall, leaves me speechless. I can feel the phones on me, recording my silence. I look past him and my heart sinks lower. I see familiar faces in the crowd, not just his employees, but other contractors, men I know. There is Mike Sullivan, whose drywall business I had helped restructure the books for just 3 years ago. Saving him from an IRS audit, he is filming me, his face set in a mask of disgust. There is Gary Alonzo, who used to slip me extra cookies from the lunch truck when I was a kid visiting a job site. He is standing with his arms crossed, shaking his head, muttering something to the man next to him. They all look at me as if I am a stranger, a monster. They have only heard his side, the side where he is the victim, and I am the greedy, parasitic child. My phone vibrates in my pocket. I do not need to look. I know what it is. A notification from the Build Talk Forum, the private online group for the Riverside County Builders Association. My father, I knew, had been active on it for weeks. I had seen the thread title, forwarded by a former friend. A father's warning, how to protect yourself when your own greedy daughter tries to steal your legacy. The post was full of lies, half-truths, and appeals to old-world values, painting me as an ungrateful, lazy millennial who had never done a real day's work and was now trying to steal the fruits of his labor. He had ended the post with an invitation. Come to the Riverside Courthouse on Tuesday. Come and watch a father stand up for what is right. Come and watch justice prevail against greed. And they had come. They had all come. Let him perform. The voice is low, calm, and right next to my ear, Caleb Rivers, my lawyer, materializes at my side. He is the opposite of my father. Tall, lean, in an unremarkable gray suit. His presence quiet but absolute. He places a hand on the small of my back, a simple, steadying gesture. He is holding a slim leather briefcase. He is playing to the camera. "Valentina," Caleb murmurs, his gaze fixed on my father. "Let him. Every word he says out here is a gift to us in there." The more he performs as the aggrieved patriarch, the more ammunition we have to flip this script. Do not engage. We speak in the courtroom, only in the courtroom. My father sees Caleb, and his face darkens. He hates lawyers, even though he is the one who hired one first. He hates what he cannot bully. "So you brought your shark," Elias scoffs, loud enough for the crowd. "Hiding behind your high-priced city lawyer, huh?" "Elias," Caleb says, his voice flat and polite. "We will see you inside." He guides me away, past the jeering, whispering crowd, toward the security line. As I walk, a memory flashes, sharp and painful, unbidden. I am 7 years old, sitting on the front steps of that same house, the steps my father built. He is sitting next to me, his big calloused hand over mine, showing me how to hold a hammer. The air smells like fresh-cut pine and the scratchy wool of his work jacket. "This house is our castle, Val," he had said, his voice rough. "It is everything. It is blood and bone and wood." I am snapped back to the present by the harsh beep of the metal detector. The memory vanishes, replaced by the sterile reality of the courthouse. The man who taught me that lesson is now using that same castle, that same blood and bone, as a legal weapon to tear me apart in public. We get into the elevator, the doors sliding shut, muffling the din of the lobby. The silence is heavy. "You okay?" Caleb asks, hitting the button for the 3rd floor. "No," I say honestly. My voice is a croak. He brought a crowd. He called the news." "I know," Caleb says. "That is what desperate people do. They create noise to hide the facts. We have the facts. We have the briefcase." He nods at the identical briefcase in my own hand. Mine feels heavier. It feels like it weighs 7 years. The elevator dings, and the doors open onto a quiet, carpeted hallway. It is a different world from the circus downstairs. Here, the air is still. People speak in hushed tones, but the tension is thicker. We walk down the hall, room 304. On the heavy wooden door, a polished brass plaque gleams under the recessed lighting. Honorable Judge Valerie Klein. My blood, which had been boiling with anger, turns to ice. I knew who the judge was, but seeing the name etched in brass makes it real. Judge Klein. Everyone in the legal and financial world of Riverside County knew her. She was not just strict, she was a scalpel. She was known for her absolute, unyielding intolerance for financial crimes, especially those within a family. She had famously sent a man to jail for pressuring his grandmother into signing over her pension. She had publicly dismantled a trust fund manager who was skimming from his own siblings. My father's lawyer, Grant, had chosen her courtroom deliberately. They were betting everything on her reputation. They were going to paint me as the exact kind of sophisticated, cold-hearted financial predator she loved to destroy. The irony is so thick, I feel like I could choke on it. He is accusing me of the very things he is, and he has brought us before the one judge most likely to tear me to shreds if she believes his story. The atmosphere, already heavy, becomes crushing. Caleb stops just before the door. He looks at me, his eyes serious. "They built a stage for a public execution. Valentina, they want you to be the villain. They are counting on you looking guilty, on you being intimidated by that crowd. They are counting on Judge Klein to see a greedy millennial." I look at the door. I can hear the murmur of voices from within. I can feel the weight of the flannel army taking their seats in the gallery. I can feel my father's triumphant gaze on my back, even though he is not in the hallway. I take a deep breath. The air burns. I remember the last 7 years, the 70-hour work weeks, the missed weddings, the canceled vacations, the 2nd and 3rd jobs, the constant, gnawing anxiety, checking my bank accounts at 3 a.m. to make sure the transfers went through, all to save a house, all to save him. And this is my reward. If they want to watch me burn, I say, my voice low and hard, all the trembling gone, they are going to have to watch the receipts, too. I shift my grip on the heavy leather briefcase. The handle is cold and solid against my sweating palm. It is heavy with 7 years of bank statements, heavy with wire transfer confirmations, heavy with notarized agreements, heavy with the truth. I pull my shoulders back, lift my chin, and push open the door to the courtroom. The noise of the courtroom, the sea of flannel shirts, the sharp click of the court reporter's keyboard, it all fades into a low, dull hum. How does a father drag his daughter into court for fraud? It does not happen overnight. It is not one single act of betrayal. It is a foundation, laid over decades, a foundation of dismissal, of casual contempt, of 1,000 tiny cuts that tell you, over and over, that you are not the child he wanted. My education in being a disappointment began when I was 16. It was a hot, dusty summer in Milford, on one of my father's sprawling job sites. The air was thick with the scream of circular saws and the smell of raw pine. My younger brother, Logan, who was only 14, was strutting around in a brand-new stiff leather tool belt, a miniature version of our father. Elias was showing him how to frame a joist, his voice patient and proud. "You are the one, Logan," he would say, clapping him on the back, loud enough for the whole crew to hear. "You are the one who's going to carry on the Gates name. This will all be yours." I was there, too. But I was an afterthought. I was tasked with helping, which meant sitting in the dusty cab of his truck or getting in the way. That day, he yelled for me to bring him the 30-foot measuring tape. I hurried over the uneven plywood subfloor, clumsy in my sneakers, and as I handed it to him, I fumbled. The heavy metal casing slipped from my grasp and clattered loudly on the wood. Every sound on the site stopped. Every hammer, every saw went silent. A dozen men in sweat-stained shirts turned to look. My father's face went dark red. He did not just look angry, he looked disgusted. "Get out of here," he boomed, his voice echoing in the unfinished structure. "You are not cut out for this. You cannot even hold a simple tool. You belong inside, with your books. You are only good for those useless numbers on paper." He said it as an insult. I was too young to realize he had just handed me my future. From that day on, Logan was the golden heir, the successor. He was paraded around every site, introduced to every subcontractor, taught the real business. I was given a clipboard and a ledger book. "Here," my father would say, not unkindly, but dismissively. "You like numbers? Go track the expenses. Keep yourself busy." It was a game, a toy to keep the other child occupied while the real work was being done. 2 years later, I was accepted into the finance and accounting program at Lakeshore City University. It was a top-tier school, and I had worked tirelessly to get in. We had a small family party to celebrate my high school graduation. My father, Elias, stood up with a beer in his hand to make a toast. "I want to raise a glass," he announced to our aunts, uncles, and cousins. "To my son, Logan, 16 years old, and he already knows how to mix, pour, and finish a perfect concrete slab. He is going to be running Gates Construction and Sons before he is 25. Everyone cheered. My mother, Claire, nudged him. "Elias, what about Valentina?" He paused, as if genuinely forgetting I was part of the equation. "Oh, right, Valentina." He waved his beer bottle in my direction. "She is off to that big school in the city, going to learn all about, well, spreadsheets, I guess, accounting or something." He said accounting like it was a minor infection. The table gave me a few polite smiles, and then the conversation immediately turned back to Logan's gift for concrete. My college years were a blur of late nights in the library, complex financial modeling, and the slow, thrilling realization that I was exceptional at this. I understood the language of money. I won scholarships. I made the dean's list every semester. I graduated with highest honors. But whenever I came home to Milford, I was stepping back into a world where none of it mattered. The dinner table was never a place for my news. It was a strategy room for Gates construction. Every conversation revolved around Logan's new project. He was supervising a small crew by then, or Elias's new contract. My achievements were met with blank stares. When I landed my first job at Northbridge Ledger Group, one of the most prestigious financial consulting firms in the region, I was ecstatic. I called home, my voice shaking with pride. "I got the job, Dad, at Northbridge Ledger." There was a pause. I heard him take a drink of something. "Northbridge? Never heard of them. So, this is it? You got a chance to do something real?" "It is real, Dad," I said, the excitement draining from my voice. "Or are you just going to be sitting behind a desk, tapping on a keyboard all day?" Tapping on a keyboard, that was my career to him. My father's world was built of steel and wood, things you could see, touch, and measure. My world was built of risk analysis, tax law, and market projections. To him, my work was invisible, and in his mind, invisible meant useless. Our phone calls fell into a pattern. He would call, but not to talk to me. He would call for my mother, and if I picked up, he would just start talking. "Claire, listen, I need the final numbers on the rebar bid." "It is me, Dad. It's Valentina." "Oh, right. Well, while I got you, you are good with numbers. I am looking at a bid here. The materials cost is up 4.8%. What do you think if I became his free, on-call calculator. But if I ever tried to share something about my own life— "Dad, I was just put on the HelioSync account. It is a huge deal. I am handling their entire international portfolio." He would cut me off. Yeah, that is great. Honey, speaking of international, I am trying to get a shipment of this Italian marble, and the shipping costs are gonna kill me." He would pivot the conversation back to concrete and steel every single time. The breaking point, the moment I truly understood, came at a Christmas dinner. I was 27, and I had just been promoted to manager. It was a significant step, a 6-figure salary, a team of analysts under me. I was proud. I made the announcement over the turkey. "I have some exciting news. I was officially promoted to senior manager at Northbridge." My mother squeezed my arm. "Oh, Valentina, that is incredible." The table offered a round of polite, lukewarm applause, and then, not 5 seconds later, my uncle turned to Elias. "So, Elias, I drove past that new development Logan's supervising over on the west side. Looks massive. How is he handling it?" My father's face lit up like a Christmas tree. "Handling it? He is dominating it. The kid is a natural. Let me tell you, that boy, he builds things people can see." He gave me a wink, as if he were letting me in on the joke. I just smiled, a tight, painful smile, and looked down at my plate. I felt utterly and completely erased. After that, I stopped trying. I learned to be silent about my achievements. I hid my successes. I never mentioned my bonuses. I never told them what my salary had grown to. I never talked about the multi-million-dollar corporate accounts I was managing, the complex fraud cases I was helping legal teams untangle, or the companies I was saving from financial ruin. What was the point? Every small success I shared was just a reminder to him of how far I had strayed from the real world. Every achievement was met with a shrug. Every promotion a validation of my choice to be useless. My mother tried to bridge the gap. I would hear them arguing through the walls when I was home, her voice sharp and frustrated. "You are not fair to her. Elias, do you have any idea how smart she is? Without people doing the numbers, you could not buy a single bag of cement, let alone build a house." And I would always hear his thunderous, defensive reply. "You always side with her. You are coddling her. This world chews up people who are not tough." The irony was that he was the one who was not tough enough to admit his daughter was succeeding in a world he did not understand. But here's the complicated part. I never stopped loving that house. I hated the way he treated me in it, but I loved the house itself. I loved the worn banister, smooth and cool under my hand. I loved the faint pencil marks on the kitchen door frame. charting my growth from Val 1995 to Val 2003. I loved my grandfather's old rocking chair in the corner of the den, and the big, inefficient fireplace that crackled and popped on cold nights. I loved the kitchen, the one where my mother taught me how to bake, the smell of yeast and warm flour filling the air. It was the one place where I felt tangible, real. That was the paradox. The more I achieved in the financial world, the more my own father and his community of builders saw me as out of touch. The more capable and independent I became, the more I was labeled the disappointment. It was a brand seared onto my skin. I was the one who had abandoned the family legacy of sweat and sawdust for the sterile, meaningless world of tapping on a keyboard. For years, I told myself I was working so hard to prove him wrong. I told myself I was building this career so that one day he would have no choice but to respect me. But standing here, in this cold courtroom, with his flannel-shirted army staring at my back, I finally admit the truth to myself. I do not know if I was working all those years for his approval, or if, deep down, I was working to build an arsenal. I do not know if I wanted him to be proud of me, or if I was just trying to become strong enough and rich enough so that when the day finally came that he tried to destroy me, I would have the power to fight him. The breakdown of my family, like all financial collapses, began with arrogance. My father called it the Harbor Line Plaza, a sprawling, $18 million mixed-use development in the newly gentrified Riverfront district. He called it his concrete testament, his legacy. The local papers just called it over-leveraged. Elias was a builder, not a businessman. He understood materials, not markets. He thought that if you built something big enough, the money would just show up. So when a major equity investor, a firm from out of state, got spooked by a revised zoning report and pulled their $8 million commitment, my father did not retrench. He did not scale back. He panicked. He started borrowing. He took out hard money loans at interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. He leveraged every piece of equipment, every contract, every unbilled invoice, and then he did the one thing he had sworn he would never do. He took out a secret second mortgage on the one asset he owned free and clear, our family home on Maple Crest Drive. I did not find out because he told me. He would rather have had his hands cut off than ask the spreadsheet girl for help. I found out because of a clerical error. An automated notice from Heritage Union Bank, a lender I did not recognize, was sent to my mother's old, defunct email address, an address I still monitored and had linked to my own inbox to catch any loose ends from their separation. The subject line was simple: important update regarding your loan agreement. My blood went cold. My mother and I had spent months untangling her from his finances. There should not have been any more agreements. I opened the email. It was a standard notification of a change in their online servicing portal, but it referenced a loan number I did not recognize, and it was addressed to Elias and Claire Gates. He had used her name, forged her compliance, on a new loan after she had already filed for separation. I spent the next 3 hours on the phone, using the professional credentials from Northbridge. I navigated the bank's automated systems, escalated past 2 different managers, and by citing specific state co-borrower disclosure laws he had violated, I convinced a terrified vice president to fax me a copy of the loan origination documents. I printed them out at my office, the pages warm from the machine. I spread them across my desk under my task light, the rest of the office dark, and there it was. Page 26, Section 4.2a, the balloon payment. He had not just taken out a loan, he had taken out a time bomb. He had borrowed $300,000, not on a standard 30-year fixed rate, but on an interest-only, short-term note. The terms were predatory, and in less than 2 years, 22 months to be exact, the entire principal, the full $300,000, would be due in one single, massive payment. If he missed it by even 24 hours, the bank had the right to seize the property. The man who built houses had just signed the death warrant for his own. I drove to Milford that weekend. I found him in the garage, supposedly organizing tools, but mostly just moving them from one pile to another. a whiskey glass leaving a wet ring on his workbench. "What is this?" I did not say hello. I just slapped the stack of papers down on the workbench. He flinched, then his face hardened. He looked at the bank logo, then at me. "Where did you get that?" "It was sent to Mom's email. You used her name on a loan. Dad, a second mortgage." "That is none of your business," he snapped. "It is my company, my house. It is a balloon payment. Dad, did you even read this? You have less than 2 years to come up with $300,000 in cash. Your company does not have that. You do not have that." "I have it handled," he roared, slamming his hand down on the bench, making the whiskey glass jump. You read too many goddamn papers. You do not understand the real world. This is how business gets done. I made a deal with the bank. It is all taken care of." "What deal?" I pressed. "What deal specifically? What is the new amortization schedule? Did they extend the term?" "Stop it," he shouted, his face purple. "Just stop it with your goddamn office words. I told you, it is handled, and I do not want you talking to your mother about this. You hear me? Valentina? You are forbidden from bringing this to her. You are always trying to turn her against me, bringing her your inside-the-box worries." He was lying. I knew the language of finance, and I knew the language of his lies. He had not handled anything. He was in over his head, and he was drowning. 3 months later, the Harbor Line Plaza project collapsed. The bank did not extend his financing. The subcontractors, unpaid for 60 days, walked off the job and filed liens. Gates Construction and Sons, the company that bore his name and my brother's future, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The Riverside Daily Stream ran a front-page story with the headline, "Gates Construction Empire Crumbles." It described my father's financial mismanagement and overambitious planning. It was a public humiliation, and it was the final straw for my mother. She had endured his pride, his dismissal, his endless rages as the pressure mounted, but the bankruptcy, the public shame, and the realization that he had forged her name on a loan just months before broke whatever was left. She filed for divorce. She did not fight for assets. There were no real assets left to fight for. She just wanted out. She packed 2 suitcases and moved in with her sister in Solara Springs, a 4-hour drive away. She agreed to walk away with almost nothing, a small, contested portion of his already decimated pension, in exchange for one thing: her freedom. I went with her to the lawyer's office to sign the final papers. I sat beside her, holding her hand, as she signed away 30 years of her life. As the lawyer was bundling the copies, I glanced at the final asset and liability worksheet. It was a grim document, a long list of debts, and near the bottom, I saw the cold, clinical entry. Primary residence, 17 Maple Crest Doctor. Asset value, SAS, $550,000. Liabilities, $120,000. Primary mortgage, $300,000. Heritage Union Bank. Note 2. Status: pending foreclosure upon non-payment of balloon clause. On the verge of being seized. That night, I could not sleep. I left my apartment in Lakeshore City and just drove. At 2 a.m, I was parked across the street from the house on Maple Crest Drive, the engine off, the car cooling in the night air. The house was dark, except for the blue-white flicker of the television in the living room. Through the big picture window, I could see my father. He was slumped in his recliner, a bottle of whiskey on the floor next to him, his face illuminated by the glow of an infomercial. He looked small, a pathetic, self-destructive king in a castle he was about to lose. I looked away from him, up at the 2 massive maple trees in the front yard, the ones I had tried to climb and fallen from, the ones I had sat under while learning to ride my bike. My whole childhood was in that house. My mother's laughter was in the kitchen. My grandfather's stories were in the den. My own height chart was still penciled on the doorframe to the laundry room. I was faced with a choice, cold and clear as the moonlight on the dashboard. 1. I could do nothing. I could let the bank take the house. It would be justice. It would be the natural consequence of his arrogance, his lies, his refusal to listen to the spreadsheet girl. He would lose everything, and he would have no one to blame but himself. Or two, I could save it. I could secretly, quietly, step in and fix the mess. I could rescue the house, not for him, but for the memories, for my mother, who might one day want to see it again. For the part of me that was still that 7-year-old girl on the front steps, I could do it, and no one would ever have to know, especially not the man in the recliner, the man who called me a disappointment. I turned on the dome light in my car. I pulled my laptop from my briefcase. The familiar glow of the screen was a comfort. I opened a new, blank spreadsheet. This was my territory. This was my language. I started typing, a single row for my salary from Northbridge, a row for my income from my 2 ongoing evening consulting contracts. I built a third projection for what I could earn if I took on a third, a weekend client, doing forensic accounting for a law firm I knew was looking. Then came the cuts. I put a line item for my apartment. I could move, sublet my place and rent a cheap studio in the suburbs. I listed my car. I could sell it and take the train. I listed my vacation fund, my retirement contributions, my new clothes budget, my dining out budget. I slashed them all, one by one, the red numbers turning to zeros. I ran the calculation. I ran it again. It was possible. It would be 7 years. It would be over 70-hour work weeks. It would mean giving up my entire personal life. It would mean becoming a ghost, a financial engine dedicated to one purpose. But the numbers worked. I could meet the monthly interest-only payments. I could scrape together enough to pay off the $300,000 balloon payment before the deadline. It would cost me everything, but I could do it. I looked back at the house, at the man passed out in front of the TV. He did not deserve to be saved. He did not deserve this house. But my memories did. My mother did. If anyone deserves to keep this house, I whispered to myself in the dark car, it is Mom, and my memories, not Dad's ego. If someone has to pay the price, the one who actually understands the numbers will do it. I took a deep breath. I clicked the save icon on the spreadsheet. The Save As dialog box popped up. I typed in the file name, a small, bitter smile on my face. Maple Crest Rescue. I hit enter. I did not know, in that moment, that I was not just saving a file. I was creating Exhibit A for my own trial. My life became a ledger, a grim accounting of time and money, where every entry was a sacrifice and the balance was always in his favor. The first thing I did was call my mother. Claire was in Solara Springs, trying to build a new life from the wreckage. Her voice was still fragile over the phone. "Mom," I said, my voice low, "I need your help. I cannot let him lose the house, not like this." "Valentina, no, you cannot. It is his hole. Let him lie in it. Do not let him drown you too." "I am not doing it for him," I said, a line that would become my mantra. "I am doing it for you, for the memories, for the pencil marks on the door." She was silent for a long time. "What do you need?" We reactivated an old joint account we had at Lakeside Credit Union. One we had used for my college savings years ago. It was in her name and mine. This would be the transit station, the firewall. It was the only way I could move the money without my name being directly attached to the mortgage. The next step was harder. I did not just call Heritage Union Bank. I walked in my best Northbridge suit, carrying my professional briefcase. I did not ask for the customer service desk. I asked for the head of loan servicing. I was not Valentina Gates, the daughter. I was Valentina Gates, senior manager of financial forensics. I spoke their language. I explained that there was a volatile domestic situation, a pending divorce. I cited the specific, predatory terms of the balloon note. I framed it as a risk management problem for them. I proposed a solution. The existing autopay, which drew from the original, now empty joint account of Elias and Claire, must remain untouched. Any communication, any letters, must be suppressed. I would, through a separate protected channel, the Lakeside account, Ensure that the funds were available in that original account 24 hours before every scheduled withdrawal. They saw the risk of a lawsuit from a forged signature, and they agreed. To their system, it would look like Elias was paying, to Elias, who had not balanced a checkbook in his life. The silence from the bank meant he was right all along. He had handled it. And so, my 7-year shadow life began. The Maple Crest rescue spreadsheet was no longer a plan. It was my operating manual. My 50-hour-a-week job at Northbridge, the one that used to define me, was now just the primary engine. It was not enough. I called a contact at Heliosync Systems, a rapidly expanding tech firm. "You mentioned you needed evening consulting on your international finances," I said. I took the job, from 7 p.m. until midnight, Monday through Thursday. My studio apartment was lit by the glow of their complex data streams. I called a senior partner at Oak Ridge Legal Group, a firm I had worked with on a fraud case. "Your offer?" I said. "For a weekend forensic accounting consultant. Is it still open?" It was, every Saturday and Sunday, from 9 a.m. until I could not see straight. I waded through the financial filth of other people's betrayals, digging through discovery documents to find the very kind of fraud my father was about to accuse me of. My work week was no longer measured in days. It was just a block of time. 70 hours, sometimes 80. I was a ghost in my own life. I gave up my apartment in Lakeshore City, the one with the exposed brick and the view of the river. I sublet it and moved into a 400-square-foot studio in the suburbs, a beige box with a window that faced a concrete wall. I sold my good furniture, the mid-century modern pieces I had saved for. I kept my mattress, a desk, a lamp, and a chair. My diet became ruthlessly efficient. No more $6 lattes. No more dinners out with friends. I batch-cooked vats of lentils and brown rice on Sunday night. I drank instant coffee. Black. I was a senior financial manager living on a budget that would make a graduate student wince. But the worst part was the ritual. It happened at the end of every month, the transfers. My paychecks and consulting fees did not all land at once. I would be at my desk at 2 or 3 in the morning, my eyes burning, watching my accounts. The paycheck from Northbridge would land. I would calculate, okay, $600 for the balloon fund, $200 for the interest payment. I would hit transfer, the wire from Heliosync would clear, transfer, the payment from Oak Ridge, transfer. I would shuttle the money through the digital maze I had built, from my personal accounts to the Lakeside account, from the Lakeside account to the old Elias and Claire account, and then I would make the final, agonizing transfer, the massive chunk into the high-yield savings account I had opened, the one labeled balloon. Each time, I would stare at the number that was left, the tiny, pitiful amount that was mine, the amount I had to live on for the next 30 days. Every single time, my stomach would fall. It was a physical, sickening lurch, a jolt of pure panic. What if I get sick? What if my car breaks down? I was running my life on zero margin. While I was living this monastic, terrified existence, my father was rewriting history. He was holding court at the Trestle, the dark, wood-paneled bar where all the local contractors went. I heard all about it from my mother, who heard it from her sister, who still heard the gossip from Milford. "I stared those bankers down," he would boom, lifting his beer, his audience of flannel-shirted men hanging on his every word. "They thought they could steal my house. They thought they had old Elias Gates in a corner. But you cannot bullshit a bullshitter. I used my experience, my leverage. I renegotiated the whole damn thing. I beat them at their own game." He would raise his glass. "They are not taking my house, not while I am breathing." And the whole bar would cheer for him. The local hero, the savvy businessman who had outsmarted the city suits. My colleagues at Northbridge just thought I was a workaholic. My performance was better than ever. When your life is nothing but work, you get a lot done, but the physical cost was undeniable. One morning, or rather, one night, at 3 a.m., my colleague Mara came into the conference room to grab a file for an early flight. We were on a massive corporate merger deadline. She found me fast asleep, my forehead pressed against the cool glass of the conference table, my monitor still glowing with the spreadsheets from Oak Ridge Legal. She touched my shoulder, and I jolted awake, gasping, my heart hammering. "Valentina," she whispered, her eyes wide with a mixture of pity and awe. "What are you doing? You look like you are about to collapse. My God, who are you supporting? A small city?" I tried to rub the fog from my eyes. The fluorescent lights felt like knives. I attempted a smile. "No," I mumbled, my voice a gravelly whisper. "Just one roof." The invitations stopped coming. I missed 3 weddings. 3, my best friend from college, my cousin, a man I dated for 6 months, a kind architect who loved to cook, finally broke it off. "I cannot compete, Valentina," he said, his voice full of a sad resignation. "I do not know what you are running from, or what you are working toward, but you are not here. You are a ghost. You are always tired. You are always checking your phone like you are waiting for a bomb to go off. I cannot live like this." I did not have the energy to argue. He was right. The few times I drove to Milford to check on the house, the toxicity was palpable. My father had met Lena. She was young, sharp, and moved in with the speed of a predator sensing an opportunity. She was there, in my mother's kitchen, painting the walls a sterile, cold gray. One Sunday, a neighbor, Mr. Henderson, stopped by. "Elias," he called out, "good to see you are still here. Heard the banks almost got you." My father, who was standing on my porch, which I was paying for, laughed his big, hearty laugh. "Ah, you know how it is. Henderson, just a little financial maneuvering. Had to teach those bankers a lesson they will not forget." He then hooked a thumb toward me, where I was sitting on the steps, nursing a cup of instant coffee. "My daughter here would not get it. She just sits in her air-conditioned office, tapping on a keyboard. Out here, in the real world, you gotta have guts." Lena was worse. She was smarter than he was, which made her more dangerous. She saw me as a rival, a lingering claim on the asset she was planning to acquire. "It is so sweet how you're always hanging around. Valentina," she said one afternoon, her voice dripping with saccharin, right in front of him. "Some people just get so attached to things. It is almost like you are just waiting, hovering, for the day this beautiful house changes hands." She would turn to my father, stroking his arm. "Do not you worry, baby. I am going to help you protect your assets. We have to be so careful who we trust, especially when there is this much equity involved." The years became a blur. The balloon payment was the final mountain, the $300,000. The monthly payments were just interest. This was the principle. For 2 years leading up to the deadline, I poured every cent I had into that high-yield savings account. The deadline was November 1st, 7 years after I had started. On October 28th, I sat in the parking lot of my studio apartment, my car engine off, the windows fogged with my breath. I had it. It was all there. I had sold my car, taken the bus for the last 6 months to get the final $5,000. I opened my banking app. I executed the transfer. From my savings to the Lakeside account. From the Lakeside account to the Elias and Claire account. And from there, I initiated the final wire transfer to Heritage Union Bank. Principal payment in full. My entire net worth, 7 years of my 30s, gone, in a single, sterile click. I hit confirm. I sat there, my phone screen dimming, and then the dam broke. I put my head on the steering wheel and I wept. It was not relief. It was not joy. It was a grief so profound it was physical. It was the crushing weight of my own invisibility. I had just erased 7 years of my life to save a man who despised me, and to save a house he was trying to give to a woman who was playing him. If I died tomorrow, no one would ever know. 7 years, they were marked by 3 things. 1. The meticulous, chronological stack of receipts, bank statements, and wire transfer confirmations, all stored in a fireproof safe deposit box at First Horizon Safe Deposit. 2. The dark, bruised-looking circles under my eyes, which were now a permanent feature of my face. 3. The escalating, breathtaking arrogance of my father. A week later, on a cold, gray morning, my phone buzzed. It was an email from my bank's automated alert system. A new document was available. I opened the PDF. It was a letter, addressed to Elias and Claire Gates. We are pleased to inform you that the loan secured by your property at 17 Maple Crest Drive has been paid in full. I stared at the words, paid in full. A single tear tracked down my cheek and splashed onto my keyboard. I did not sob. It was just a quiet, final release. It was done. The house was safe. My secret was safe. I closed the file. I wiped my face. All right, I thought, it is over. He will never have to know. He can keep telling his bar stories. He can go on believing he is the hero. He will never, ever know what I did. I took a deep breath, the first one that did not feel shallow in 7 years. He will never know, unless he is stupid enough and cruel enough to make me tell everyone, for 7 years, my life had been a marathon. Now that it was over, I did not know what to do. I had time. I had a sliver of disposable income for the first time in what felt like a decade. I was still living in the beige box studio, still drinking instant coffee, but the crushing 2A panic was gone. The relief was a fragile, thin ice thing, and it lasted exactly 3 weeks. It was a Saturday in late autumn. I was in Milford, a rare, unannounced visit, driving down streets I had not seen in daylight for years. I had a vague idea of taking my mother's old rose bushes from the house, digging them up before Lena had a chance to replace them with sterile, gray gravel. I pulled onto Maple Crest Drive and parked at the curb. Not in the driveway, a habit. I was still a visitor, a ghost. I let myself in the side door with the key I still kept, the one my father had forgotten about. The house was quiet, but there was a tension in the air. I heard a faint click, click, click from the den, my father's old office. I walked down the hall. The door was ajar. Lena was in there, standing by my father's desk. She was not organizing, as she later claimed. She was holding her phone over his desk, which was littered with documents, with a cold, clinical precision. She was photographing them. Click, a bank statement. Click, a stack of old contracts. Click. She was not organizing. She was building a file. Lena? She jumped, gasping, and spun around, pressing the phone to her chest. Valentina, my God, you scared me half to death. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same thing, I said, my eyes fixed on the desk. What are you doing with Dad's papers? Oh, this? She forced a laugh, a high, brittle sound. I am just trying to organize for him. You know, Elias, he just lets things pile up. These old papers are so confusing. I'm just trying to make sense of it all, so he does not have to worry. She was a terrible liar, but she was a confident one. She was already moving to block the desk with her body, but it was too late. I had seen what she was photographing, and I saw what was still on her phone's screen before she quickly locked it. She had not been looking at his bank statements. She had been on a website, Homeview Market, and I saw the number, big and bold, at the top of the page, the estimated value for 17 Maple Crest Drive. The market had recovered, and then some. The house was no longer worth $550,000. The new estimate was just shy of $1 million. And the look on her face, in that split second before she saw me, was not the look of a concerned wife. It was the look of a person who had just scratched off a lottery ticket and found a life-changing prize. I did not bother with the roses. I mumbled something about leaving and got out of there, the back of my neck prickling. That night, I could not shake the feeling. I drove back, parking down the street, my headlights off. I walked through the neighbor's dark yard and stood in the shadows of the big maple trees in our own backyard. The living room window was open a crack, the autumn air still mild. I heard their voices, sharp and clear. Hers, first, Lena. You are not listening to me, Elias. You are sitting on a gold mine, and that daughter of yours keeps sniffing around. She is here every other week, just looking, She is my daughter. Lena, she grew up here. So what? His voice was slurred, the defensive rumble of a man on his fourth drink. So what? She shrieked, her voice dropping the saccharine mask. So what is that she thinks she is entitled to it? She thinks you are just going to die and hand it to her. She thinks she can just waltz in and take it. I see how she looks at me. You have to act first. Elias, you have to protect us. You have to protect your legacy. What am I supposed to do? He said, a whine creeping into his voice. It is Valentina. You are supposed to be a man, she hissed. You are supposed to call Grant. I told you, he knows how to handle this. You are the victim here. Baby, you are the one who was taken advantage of. You just have to be strong enough to say it. I slipped away, back to my car, my hands shaking. Grant, I knew that name. Grant Holloway. He had been a paralegal at a bottom-feeder firm Lena had worked at for 6 months. Now, apparently, he had his own shingle, and he had an idea. A few weeks went by. The dread settled into a low-grade hum in the back of my skull. I did not know what was coming, only that it was. In the meantime, my life in Lakeshore City went on. I finally received the official, hard-copy letter from Heritage Union Bank. Loan status, paid in full. I printed it out, just a single sheet of paper. I taped it to the front of my refrigerator, right next to a takeout menu. It was my trophy. It was the only proof I needed that the 7-year nightmare was over. I had done my duty. I had saved the house. I could finally, truly, be done. I was sitting on my second-hand sofa, eating a bowl of cereal for dinner and celebrating this tiny private victory. Then came the knock on the door. It was not a friendly knock. It was not a neighbor. It was a hard official pounding. 5 raps that vibrated the cheap particle board of my door. I opened it. A man in a stained polo shirt stood there, looking bored. Valentina Gates? Yes? He thrust a thick 9 by 12-inch envelope at me. You have been served. He did not wait for a reply. He turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the linoleum hallway. I closed the door. My hands were trembling. I knew what a summons looked like. I was a forensic accountant. I saw them all the time, just not with my name on them. I ripped the envelope open. The top sheet was the summons, commanding my appearance in court. The document behind it was the complaint. I read the header. Elias Gates, plaintiff versus Valentina Gates, defendant. I sat down on the floor, my cereal forgotten. I read the words, but my brain could not assemble them. The charges, the causes of action. Count 1, elder abuse. Count 2, deceit and fraudulent misrepresentation. Count 3, unjust enrichment. Count 4, unlawful detainer. Count 5, conspiracy to commit property fraud. I felt the air leave my lungs. It was not a lawsuit. It was an assassination. He was accusing me, of the very things I had saved him from. Unjust enrichment? I had poured my entire net worth into that house. Unlawful detainer? He was accusing me of being a squatter in my childhood home. He was using the 7 years of ghost payments, the complex, invisible network of transfers I had built to save him, as evidence of a criminal conspiracy. They had taken my ledger of sacrifice and called it a criminal's playbook. Then I read the statement of facts. It was Grant Holloway's voice, full of slimy legal prose, but it was Lena's and my father's venom. It was a masterpiece of fiction. It painted a picture of my father, a grieving and financially distressed man, still reeling from his bankruptcy and divorce, being systematically targeted by his financially sophisticated daughter. It claimed I had used his grief to unduly influence him, to force him to sign documents he did not understand, to seize control of his only remaining asset. And then I read the sentence that stopped my heart. The defendant, Valentina Gates, Grant had written, a 33-year-old woman, financially unstable and having never held a real job, exploited her father's trust. The words swam, never held a real job, the 70-hour weeks, the 3 a.m. transfers, the missed weddings, The instant coffee and the beige box I was sitting in, the promotion to senior manager, the six-figure salary I had hidden from them, all of it erased in one contemptuous, false legal statement. It was not just a lie. It was the ultimate, final expression of his lifelong dismissal of me. My entire career, my entire life, was not a real job. It was just tapping on a keyboard. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from my old college roommate. "Val, what the hell is going on? My cousin is a contractor in Riverside. He just sent me this." It was a link. It led to the Build Talk forum. My father's post, in the Builders of Riverside County group, was not hard to find. It was at the top. It had over 300 comments. The title was, "A Father's Warning. My own daughter is trying to steal my house." He told them everything, or rather, his version of it. He wrote about his simple, trusting nature. He wrote about his ungrateful, greedy daughter, who had never worked a real day of hard labor, but who knew all the city lawyer tricks. He claimed I had used my spreadsheet magic to trick the bank and the courts, and was trying to put her own father out on the street. He ended the post with a call to arms. "I am taking a stand, for all of us, for every parent who has been disrespected by a generation that thinks they are entitled to what we built. I am suing her, and I want you all to come and watch justice be served. Come to the Riverside Courthouse on the 15th. Let us show them they cannot steal from us." The comments were a waterfall of poison. "Disgusting. Throw the book at her." "My son tried this. I kicked him out. Good for you, Elias." "These millennial brats are all the same. Hope she goes to jail." "We are with you, Elias. We will be there." Each comment was a new knife, twisting in a wound I did not even know was open. They were not just accusing me, they hated me, an entire community of strangers, whipped into a frenzy by my father, now saw me as the enemy. My phone rang, startling me. It was my mother. Her voice was not sad. It was a low, vibrating wire of pure rage. "I just got a call from your Aunt Jean," she said, dispensing with hello. "He did it. The bastard. He actually did it. After everything you did. After all those years." "Mom, He is suing you. Tell me it is not true." "It is true." There was a heavy silence. Then, "Valentina, you tell me this right now. You kept the receipts, did not you? The statements, the transfers. You kept everything." I looked at the paid-in-full notice, still taped to my fridge. "Yes, Mom," I whispered. "I kept everything." "Good," she said, her voice like flint. "Good. You burn him to the ground." She hung up. I sat there for a long minute, the thick, heavy complaint in my lap, the summons, the forum post, the anger from my mother. It was all too much. I picked up my phone. I scanned every single page of the lawsuit. I attached the link to the forum. I typed a single email address. Caleb Rivers, my lawyer, the smartest, coldest, most effective attorney I had ever worked with at Northbridge. I typed one sentence in the body. "Caleb, it looks like I need a litigator." He called me back in 10 minutes. He had already read everything. He was not emotional. He was not angry. He was something far more terrifying. He was interested. "Okay," he said, his voice calm and cold as a tomb. "This is loud. Holloway is a hack, but this is an ugly narrative. He is painting you as a criminal." "He is lying about everything," I said, my voice shaking. "I saved that house. I paid for it." Caleb was quiet. I could hear him thinking. "He is not just suing you for the house, Valentina. He is suing you for your reputation. He is trying to ruin you in your own industry." "What do we do?" "He wants to use paper to turn his daughter into a defendant," Caleb said, and I heard the shift in his voice, the steel sliding into place. "So, we will let the paper talk back. We will bring our own, and we will make sure our paper is loud enough for the whole town to hear. Mr. Holloway, you may call your first witness," Judge Klein said, her voice flat and devoid of emotion. Grant Holloway stood, beaming with a predator's confidence. The plaintiff calls Elias Gates. The courtroom was packed. Every seat in the gallery was full, a sea of plaid flannel and denim, my father's army. They shifted and murmured as he rose, his blue suit impeccable, his face a mask of solemn duty. He walked to the witness stand, his heavy work boots making a solid, authoritative sound on the wooden floor. He looked every inch the pillar of the community, the wronged man. He placed his left hand on the Bible, raised his right, and swore to tell the whole truth. So help him God. The irony was so thick, I could have choked on it. He sat down. Grant started, his voice gentle, dripping with sympathy. Mr. Gates, this must be incredibly difficult for you. Can you please tell the court, in your own words, what happened? My father let out a long, shaky sigh. He looked at the judge, at the jury, and then he let his eyes sweep over the crowd of his supporters. I am a simple man, Your Honor, he began, his voice rough with manufactured emotion. I am not a lawyer. I am not a financial wizard like my daughter. He said daughter like it was a word he had learned to despise. I build things. I build them with my hands. For 35 years, I have poured my sweat and my blood into my company, into my home. It is all I have. He paused, choking back a non-existent sob. He was good. This was the best performance of his life. And to be betrayed, he continued, his voice cracking, by your own flesh and blood. Let's go back, Mr. Gates, Grant said, guiding his star performer. Can you tell us about your daughter, the defendant? What does she do for a living? Elias scoffed, a small, sad sound. Honestly, I could not tell you. She sits behind a computer. She works in one of those big glass towers in Lakeshore City. She taps on a keyboard. She moves numbers around. It is not real work, not the kind that builds a country, not the kind that builds a home. And in her entire adult life, Mr. Gates, have you ever seen a single paycheck from her? Never, my father said, shaking his head. Not one. I would not even know who pays her, or if she is paid at all. For all I know, it is all a house of cards. The lie was so perfect, so clean. He had never seen a paycheck because I had hidden them. I hid my 6-figure salary. I hid my bonuses. I hid my consulting fees. Also, he would not feel emasculated. Also, I could silently pay off the debts he had accrued. I had given him the gift of my invisibility, and he had just gift-wrapped it for his lawyer. So, she has this not real job, Grant said. But she was a frequent presence at your home, was she not? She was always around, Elias said, his voice hardening. After her mother, after Claire left me, Valentina was there, drifting in and out. I thought she was grieving. I thought she needed her father. But she was a parasite. I flinched. The word hit me like a physical slap. In the gallery, the flannel army nodded in agreement. Parasite. She ate my food, Elias continued, ticking off his fingers. She used my utilities. She lived there, in my house, the house I built, claiming she was helping me. But she was just latching on, taking up space. He conveniently forgot the years I lived there as a student, contributing my entire summer job earnings to the household. He forgot the checks I wrote for groceries, the times I had paid for repairs on the roof, the hot water heater I replaced, all of it, erased. And then, Grant said, his voice dropping, you discovered she was doing more than just taking up space. She was moving money. I do not understand it, Elias said, looking genuinely confused, a brilliant touch. Grant, you show them. I cannot even follow it. Grant smiled. He gestured to the large screen. Your Honor, we will now look at the bank statements obtained in discovery. He projected the statements from the transit station account, the Lakeside Credit Union account I had shared with my mother. Mr. Gates, do you recognize these transfers? This complex, dizzying network of accounts? My father squinted. I do not. It is all her name. Valentina, over and over, and my old account with Claire. I thought that was closed. It is like a shell game. It is like she was using magic tricks to. I do not know what she was doing. It is all just numbers she made up. She made up, Grant repeated, letting the phrase hang in the air. Or, Mr. Gates, was she creating a fake trail? A fraudulent path? Was she making it look like she was paying things? To confuse the bank? To confuse you? Also she could gain control? Objection, Caleb said, his voice a bored monotone. Counsel is testifying. Sustained, Judge Klein said. Watch yourself, Mr. Holloway. My apologies, Your Honor. The facts speak for themselves. Grant turned back to Elias. No further questions for this brave man. My father walked back to his seat. A hero's journey completed. He accepted a pat on the back from a subcontractor in the front row. The plaintiff calls Lena Gates. Lena's performance was entirely different, but just as polished. Where Elias was all rugged, betrayed strength, Lena was pure, fragile victimhood. She practically floated to the stand, clutching a small, wadded tissue. She wore a high-necked, beige blouse. She looked like a dove who had just found $1 million nest. She swore her oath, her voice a terrified whisper. Mrs. Gates, Grant said, his voice now a soft, protective baritone. I know this is hard. Can you please tell the court about the defendant's behavior toward you and your husband? Lena dabbed at her perfectly dry eyes. It has been a nightmare. Elias is such a good man, so trusting, and she... Lena looked at me, her eyes wide with practiced fear. She was always there. This was, apparently, their theme. I would try to make a home for my new husband, try to help him heal from his financial troubles, and she would just show up, unannounced, at all hours. And what would she do? Grant asked, leaning in. She would sit, Lena whispered, as if revealing a terrible secret. She would sit in her car, out front, for hours, just staring at the house. A ripple of murmurs went through the gallery, crazy, creepy. At first I thought she was just, sad, but it was not sad. It was obsessive. It was an unhealthy fixation on her father's property. It scared me. I told Elias, that is not normal. That is someone who is coveting. She did not know, could not know, that I was sitting in my car at 2 a.m, executing the wire transfers from my laptop, my hands shaking, my stomach churning with anxiety as I moved my entire paycheck from my account to the one that would save his house. I was not coveting, I was paying. And did you find anything inside the house that confirmed your fears? Grant prompted. Yes, Lena said, her voice dropping. Oh, yes, I was trying to organize for Elias. His office was such a mess. And in her old bedroom, I found files, stacks and stacks of them. She was talking about my old college textbooks, my case study files from my first internship. It was terrifying, Lena said, her eyes glistening. It was not just regular paper, it was financial plans, things about offshore accounts and tax loopholes, and she leaned toward the microphone, as if afraid to say it out loud. I worked as a paralegal for a few months, before I met Elias. It was a long time ago, but I know what a shady financial plan looks like. I know what money laundering looks like, and I was so scared she was dragging my husband into her criminal world. A collective gasp went up from the flannel army. Money laundering, the magic word, the ultimate sin. Caleb's hand clamped down on my arm. Just for a second, a silent, urgent command. Do not react. I kept my face a mask of stone. Inside, I was vibrating with a rage so cold it burned. Thank you, Mrs. Gates, Grant said, his voice heavy with admiration for her bravery. You can step down. Lena floated back to her seat, having successfully painted me as a cross between a stalker and a cartel boss. Grant Holloway moved to the center of the courtroom for his finale. He projected the statements from my transit account again, side by side with the statements from my personal Northbridge salary account. "It is a web, Your Honor," he boomed. "A complex, interlocking, suspicious network of transactions, designed by a financial predator, trained in the city, to isolate, confuse, and ultimately defraud a good, simple, hard-working man of his only asset. She is a cuckoo bird, laying her eggs in his nest." The whispers from the gallery were loud now, insistent. Knew she was one of those types. Look at her, just sitting there, cold as ice. Always on that damn laptop. Bet she was hacking him. I gripped my hands in my lap, my nails digging crescents into my palms. I focused on a spot on the wall just past Judge Klein's head. I would not look at them. I would not give them the satisfaction of my tears. Grant turned, his arms open wide, addressing the gallery as much as the judge. "This is not just a dispute over property," he declared. "This is about a moral line. This is about saying no to an entitled, greedy generation that believes everything their parents built, with their sweat, with their hands, belongs to them by default. It is about saying no to financial abuse. It is about protecting our fathers." He sat down. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. Judge Klein stared at him, unblinking, for a full 10 seconds. Her face was granite. "Mr. Holloway," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like a razor. "That was a fine speech, but to this point, I have heard many accusations. I have heard parasite, money laundering, and web of deceit. What I have not seen is a single piece of concrete evidence that the defendant either stole a single dollar or coerced the plaintiff into signing a single document he did not wish to sign. All I see are bank statements that show mortgage payments being made. Am I missing something?" A glorious, beautiful crack. My father's smug expression faltered. He leaned over and whispered angrily to Grant. Grant, looking flustered for the first time, scrambled to his feet. "Of course, Your Honor. It is not just the finances. It is the pattern of control, the disrespect. I submit into evidence emails from the defendant to the plaintiff dating back 5 years. He projected them. My old emails. My God. Dad," one read, "you cannot claim the new truck as a 100% business expense when you are using it to go fishing. This is how you get audited. I am begging you, let me fix this." Another, "Dad, the depreciation schedule you sent me for the new excavators is all wrong. You will be paying thousands more in taxes. Please, just let me file the extension for you." Grant read them with a sneer. "Does this sound like a loving daughter, Your Honor? Or does it sound like a controlling, disrespectful employee trying to seize power from the boss? She was fixing his books. All right, she was fixing them. For herself." He had done it. He had taken my desperate, failed attempts to save my father from his own incompetence and painted them as a hostile takeover. "The plaintiff rests, Your Honor." Grant sat down. In the back, 2 of the flannel-shirted men started to clap. A short, sharp burst of sound that was immediately silenced by a death glare from the bailiff. Elias sat back, crossing his arms. He looked smug, satisfied. He had performed his part. He had just convinced a courtroom full of his friends that he was the victim. And I was the villain. He was the betrayed patriarch. I was the parasite. The courtroom was quiet. Every eye, including the local news camera, was on me. They were all waiting for the greedy daughter to finally break down. Judge Klein turned her gaze to our table. It was cold, impartial, and missed absolutely nothing. "Ms. Gates," she said, her voice echoing in the hush. "It is now your turn, Your Counsel." I did not move. I didn't look at my father. I looked straight at the judge. Caleb stood up. He did it slowly, deliberately. He buttoned the single button of his gray suit jacket. He walked to the lectern, not with Grant's theatrical energy, but with the quiet, devastating confidence of an undertaker. He placed one single, slim manila file on the polished wood. "Thank you, Your Honor," Caleb said, his voice perfectly even, calibrated to fill the room without ever rising. Mr. Holloway has given us a great deal of theater, a lot of words, parasite, web, entitlement. We, on the other hand, prefer to argue with facts. He paused, a perfect, calculated beat, letting the silence stretch. Your Honor, he continued, we will begin with the one thing that everyone in this room, whether they work in construction or in an office, understands. He turned his head, just slightly, to look at the jury, and then pointedly at the flannel army. Numbers. The defense calls Nadia Ortiz. Caleb's voice was calm, almost conversational. A woman in a dark navy blue suit, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, walked to the witness stand. She moved with an air of absolute, no-nonsense efficiency. She carried a thick, sealed document binder. Please state your name and position for the record, the bailiff instructed. Nadia Ortiz. I am the Senior Vice President of Loan Servicing and Foreclosures for the Eastern Region at Heritage Union Bank. She was sworn in. Caleb approached the lectern. Ms. Ortiz, are you familiar with the loan ending in 8475, secured by the property at 17 Maple Crest Drive, under the name Elias Gates? I am, she said. Her voice was crisp. It was one of my files for several years. And what was the status of that loan? Say, 7 years and 3 months ago? It was in critical default, Nadia said, not even needing to consult her notes. The borrower had missed multiple payments after the bankruptcy of his primary business. We had accelerated the loan. The full $300,000 balloon payment was due, and he had no means to pay. We were approximately 90 days from seizing the property. We were, in fact, initiating foreclosure proceedings. A low, deep murmur rippled through the flannel-clad gallery. This was news to them. My father's heroic story of staring down the bankers was already beginning to crack. And yet, Caleb continued, the bank did not foreclose. Why not? Because a third party intervened, Nadia said. A representative of the family, a financial professional, contacted our legal department. She presented a creative, but fully secured, plan to service the debt. And was this plan executed? It was, Nadia said. For 7 years, without a single missed payment, the monthly interest-only payments were made, and 2 months before the final deadline, the entire $300,000 balloon payment, which our bank had been certain was a point of no return, was paid in full. So, Miss Ortiz, Caleb said, to be clear, without these payments, Heritage Union Bank would have seized and sold this house? Absolutely, she stated. Without this intervention, Mr. Gates would have been evicted. The bank would have owned that house for the last 7 years. And who, according to your official bank records, made these payments? Grant Holloway jumped to his feet. Objection! Relevance! The plaintiff has already stipulated that the payments were made. We are arguing how and why. Judge Klein did not even look up from her screen. Overruled. The who seems to be the entire point of this lawsuit. Mr. Holloway, sit down. My father shot Grant a furious look. Grant sat down, his face modeling. Ms. Ortiz? Caleb prompted. Nadia nodded. She opened her thick, sealed binder. Your Honor, as per the subpoena, I have a complete printout of the transaction history for the escrow account used to service this loan. Please, project it for the court, Caleb said. The large screen that had, moments before, shown my controlling emails flickered to life. It was replaced by a massive spreadsheet, a bank ledger, cold, black and white. Nadia used a laser pointer, its red dot sharp and unwavering. The escrow account was funded multiple times a month. Immediately before the mortgage payment was due to be drawn, the funds arrived from several different source accounts, as you can see, here, and here, and here. The camera on the projector zoomed in, focusing on the sender column. It was just my name, over and over, in sterile. Capital letters, Valentina A. Gates, Valentina A. Gates, Valentina A. Gates, Valentina A. Gates. Furthermore, Nadia continued, her voice relentless, we were asked to analyze the timestamps of these incoming transfers. They are unusual. For a personal account, they almost all occurred between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning. I closed my eyes for a second, a flashback of the blinding panic of my laptop screen, the confirm transfer button, hitting my eyes at 3 a.m. The defense, Nadia said, has provided corresponding documentation showing that these timestamps, to the minute, align with the direct deposit paychecks from Northbridge Ledger Group and the wire transfers for consulting fees from HelioSync Systems and Oak Ridge Legal Group, all of which are payable to Valentina A. Gates. And the total amount, Caleb asked, his voice still quiet. That was paid by Ms. Gates over these 7 years, including the balloon payment, to save this house from foreclosure? Nadia turned a page in her binder. The final, combined total of all payments made by Ms. Gates toward this loan was $482,115.41. The number echoed in the silent room. $482,000. It was not money. It was my youth. It was my 30s. It was every missed wedding, every night of sleep, every relationship I did not have time for. And he had called me a parasite. Thank you, Ms. Ortiz, Caleb said. Your witness? Grant Holloway looked like he had swallowed a fly. He stood up, trying to regain his footing, to find his swagger. Ms. Ortiz, isn't it true that my client, Mr. Elias Gates, could have been giving the defendant cash to make these payments? And she was just, laundering it for him? Lena, sitting at the plaintiff's table, nodded vigorously. Nadia Ortiz, a senior VP of a major bank, looked at Grant like he was a moldy piece of bread. I am a banker, Mr. Holloway. I do not deal in speculation. I deal in transactional data. Our records, obtained under your own subpoena, show the complete chain of custody for the funds. The money originated from her payroll deposits. At no point did our systems register any cash deposits or transfers from any account bearing the name Elias Gates into any of the defendant's accounts associated with these payments. The money was 100% hers. A loud, excited buzz went through the gallery. It was not a whisper. It was the sound of a narrative shattering. It was the sound of dozens of men realizing they had been played for fools. The defense calls Mason Cole. Mason, my boss from Northbridge, walked to the stand. He was wearing his best $3,000 suit, and he looked annoyed to be there, which was perfect. He was sworn in. Mr. Cole, Caleb said, you are the Senior Vice President of Human Resources at Northbridge Ledger Group? That is correct. And do you know the defendant, Valentina Gates? I do. She is one of our most valuable assets, a senior manager in our forensic accounting division. Mr. Holloway, in his opening statement, and Mr. Elias Gates, in his public posts, described Ms. Gates as financially unstable and having never held a real job. Does that characterization match your employment records? Mason Cole actually allowed himself a small, dry chuckle. Your Honor, Valentina Gates makes a salary well into the 6 figures, plus significant performance bonuses. She is the person we assign to our most volatile, complex, and high-stakes corporate clients. She is, frankly, a lifesaver. She is the best there is. A lifesaver? Caleb asked. We have a saying at the firm, Mason said, leaning into the mic. If your company is on fire and the IRS is at the door, you do not call the fire department. You call Valentina Gates at midnight. She is the one who finds the error. She is the one who unwinds the fraud. She is the one who saves the company. She is legendary. I stared at the scarred wood of the table in front of me. I had never heard him say that before. So, Caleb said, in your professional opinion, she is not unemployed or unstable? She is one of the most stable and ruthlessly employed people I have ever met, Mason said. We would be lost without her. Thank you. Mr. Cole? Caleb turned back to the judge. Your Honor, in lieu of calling more witnesses to this point, the defense submits 2 notarized letters from Ms. Gates's other clients, the ones she worked for at night and on weekends. The first, from the CEO of Heliosync Systems, states, and I quote, "Valentina Gates was not an employee. She was our financial savior. Her consulting work untangled a multi-year auditing nightmare and saved our company from sanctions." The second, from a senior partner at Oak Ridge Legal Group, states, "We use Ms. Gates's forensic reports as the gold standard for our own litigation. Her work is meticulous, beyond reproach, and has been the foundation for several of our largest corporate fraud cases." Caleb paused, letting the words sink in. "So, far from being a money launderer, Your Honor, the defendant is, professionally, the person you hire to catch money launderers." Caleb walked to the screen. He clicked a button, and a new slide appeared. It was simple, black and white, and devastating. It was split into 2 columns. On the left, the plaintiff's claim, Elias Gates. Never held a real job. Financially unstable. A parasite who ate my food and used my utilities. On the right, the facts, receipts. Senior manager, Northbridge, 6-figure salary. Source, M. Cole, HR. Financial savior. Source, Heliosync, Oak Ridge Legal. Paid $482,115.41 in mortgage debt. Source, N. Ortiz, Heritage Bank. It was my entire defense on one slide. It was my whole 7-year-long secret, reduced to 3 bullet points. Grant Holloway knew he was beaten. He knew he had been out-lawyered. He knew his entire case, which was based on narrative, had just been destroyed by facts. He stood up, his face purple, grasping at the last, desperate straw he had. "Your Honor," he shouted, This is all just a smokescreen. It does not change the fact. If she did all this, if she is so good and noble, why did she never tell her own father? Why the secrecy?" He sneered, turning to point at me, a real gotcha moment in his small, poisonous mind. "Why did you hide it? What were you afraid of? If you were so proud of saving him, why not just tell him?" He sat down, triumphant, thinking he had finally found the crack in my story. He thought he had just exposed my deceitful nature. He had no idea. He had just walked right into Caleb's trap. He had just asked the one question that unlocked everything. Caleb smiled, a tiny, cold, razor-thin smile. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's counsel asks a very good question. It is the central question of this entire case, and it is a question my client, Ms. Gates, will be answering herself very shortly." He turned back to the judge. "But before she does, the defense has one final, brief witness. This is purely a procedural matter. Your Honor, to establish the authenticity of a public record, the defense calls Janet Hollow, from the Riverside County Register of Deeds. This was not like the other names. This was not a city banker or a corporate executive. This was their world, the county building. Janet Hollow was the woman who stamped their permits, who filed their liens. A middle-aged woman in a floral blouse and a county-issued cardigan walked to the stand. She was carrying a single, sealed, legal-sized manila envelope. The air in the room changed. It was no longer a show. I saw the shift in the gallery. The men in flannel were not laughing. They were not whispering. They were leaning forward, a few of them, the ones I knew. The subcontractors whose books I had fixed for my father for free were looking at Elias. They were looking at him with a new, dawning, and very specific kind of suspicion. They were builders. They knew what a deed was, and they, like everyone else, were wondering what was in that envelope. My father was no longer looking smug. He was looking at Grant, and for the first time, he looked exactly what he was, a panicked, cornered, and very stupid man. He was starting to remember something. Janet Hollow was sworn in. Her floral blouse a strange, soft contrast to the hard wood of the witness stand. She seemed entirely unfazed by the tension in the room. Caleb stood. "Ms. Hollow," he said, "you were served with a subpoena to produce a specific, certified document from the Riverside County Register of Deeds. Do you have that document with you?" "I do," she said, lifting the large, sealed manila envelope. "Your Honor," Caleb said, "the defense has not yet opened this document. We would ask that Ms. Hollow open the sealed envelope and identify the record for the court." Judge Klein nodded. "Proceed." All motion stopped. The sound of Janet Hollow tearing the paper seal on the envelope was loud in the dead quiet room. She slid out a thick, official-looking document with a blue backing. She studied it for a moment, then looked up. "What is that document, Ms. Hollow?" Caleb asked. "This is the original, recorded copy of a warranty deed," Janet said, her voice clear and strong. "And what property does this warranty deed pertain to?" "It is for the property at 17 Maple Crest Drive." I saw my father lean forward, his eyes narrowing. He whispered something to Grant, who just waved him off, looking annoyed. "And can you tell the court," Caleb continued, "the date this deed was filed and recorded by your office?" "Yes, it was filed 2 years ago, on May 14th. 2 years ago, and Ms. Hollow, the most critical question, can you please read the names of the grantor and the grantee on this deed?" Janet looked down at the paper. The grantor, that is the party transferring ownership, is listed as Elias Gates. The grantee, the party receiving ownership, is listed as Valentina A. Gates. It was as if a bomb had gone off in total silence. My father shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently. "What? No, that is a lie. That is impossible." Grant Holloway was right behind him, his face pale and furious. "Objection, Your Honor. This is a theatrical trick. This document was never produced in discovery. It is completely inadmissible." Judge Klein, who had been watching Janet with mild interest, now turned her full, icy attention to Grant. "A trick, Mr. Holloway? Are you telling this court that in the course of filing a lawsuit to claim ownership of a specific property, your legal team neglected to check the public deed record for that very same property?" Grant's mouth opened and closed. "Because this," the judge continued, her voice sharp, "is the definition of a public record. It is the one thing in this case that is not, he said, she said. Your objection is not only overruled. I am frankly embarrassed for you. Sit down." Grant fell back into his chair as if his strings had been cut. "Now," Caleb said, as if nothing had happened, "let us project the signature page of that deed for the court." The screen flickered, replacing the 2-column list. There it was, an official county document, and at the bottom, 2 lines. On the grantor line, my father's messy, distinctive signature. On the grantee line, my name, printed in block capitals. It was undeniable. The flannel army in the gallery was silent, the sea of faces frozen in confusion. They were builders, contractors, roofers. They lived and died by deeds, permits, and liens. They understood, better than anyone, what that document meant. It meant the game was over. "Ms. Hollow," Caleb said, his voice gentle, "do you recall the day this was filed? When Mr. Gates came in?" "Objection! Hearsay!" Grant half-heartedly yelled from his chair. "Overruled," Judge Klein snapped. "She is a county official testifying to an event she witnessed in her official capacity. Proceed. Ms. Hollow." Janet looked at my father, not with malice, but with a kind of procedural pity. I remember it clearly. Mr. Gates came in on a Friday afternoon, about 2 years ago. He was agitated. He smelled very strongly of alcohol. My father was muttering, "No, no, no." "He had the unsigned deed," Janet continued. "He wanted to sign it and file it immediately, because he was impaired. I was hesitant. I asked him, 'Mr. Gates, do you know what this document is?' He said, 'Of course I do,' he said, and I remember this exactly. My daughter is the only one who understands the numbers. She's the only one who knows what she's doing. I want to make sure she has a place to live if everything else goes to hell." "So he signed it drunk?" Grant tried to interrupt. "He did," Janet said, fixing Grant with a stare. "Which is why I notarized his signature but held the recording. I told him to come back Monday, sober, if he still wanted to file it." "And did he?" Caleb asked. "No. He came back the next Friday. He was stone sober. It was 10 in the morning. He asked me if the deed had been recorded. I told him I was waiting for his final, sober confirmation. He said, and I quote, 'Do it. I need to make sure Valentina is protected if I cannot pay my debts. She deserves the house.' And so, I recorded it. It has been the legal deed of record for 2 years." "So he was afraid of his debts," Caleb mused. "Your Honor, I now submit Defense Exhibit B, a notarized private agreement, signed by both the plaintiff and the defendant before the deed was ever filed." He put a new document on the projector. This one I knew by heart. It was the agreement I had drafted in my sterile studio apartment, the one he had signed in a desperate, clear-headed moment. "This agreement," Caleb announced, "states that in exchange for financial management and settlement of the significant debts of Gates Construction and Sons, Elias Gates agrees to transfer full title and ownership of the Maple Crest property to Valentina A. Gates. He did not just give her the house, he gave it to her as payment for the very work he now denies she ever did, the work that saved him." I thought that was for refinancing," my father yelled, his voice cracking. "I thought it was for the bank." Janet Hollow, still on the stand, leaned into her microphone. "Sir, the document you signed in my office was titled, in bold, 24-point font, Warranty Deed. I read that title aloud to you, twice. You said you understood." Caleb turned, walking slowly away from the lectern, his eyes fixed on my father. "Mr. Gates," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "Let me make sure I understand this. You are suing your daughter, Valentina Gates, for defrauding you of a house that you yourself signed over to her in a warranty deed 2 years ago, which you confirmed while sober, a house that she then proceeded to pay off, to the tune of over $480,000, to save it from foreclosure. Have I summarized the facts of your lawsuit correctly? Do you have any idea what you are doing here today?" The crowd was not breathing. The men who had clapped for my father, the men who had called me a parasite, were staring at their own boots. Mike Sullivan looked like he was going to be sick. Gary Alonzo was just shaking his head, over and over, his face a picture of grim, disappointed realization. They understood. They had been brought here as props for a lie, a pathetic, ugly lie. Caleb was not done. "One last thing, Your Honor," he said, returning to the lectern. "Mr. Holloway built his entire case on my client's deceitful nature and financial schemes. It seems only fair to examine his own." Grant looked up, his blood-drained face suddenly beaded with sweat. "I submit Defense Exhibit C," Caleb said, "subpoenaed emails between Mr. Grant Holloway and Mrs. Lena Gates." "Objection!" Grant screamed, lurching to his feet. "Attorney-client privilege. That is... "Mrs. Gates was not your client. Mr. Holloway," Caleb said, his voice like ice. "Mr. Elias Gates was, and these emails, which began before you were ever retained, are not legal advice. They fall squarely under the crime fraud exception. You were conspiring." "Mrs. Gates will sit down," Judge Klein roared. "Mr. Holloway, you will sit down, or I will have you held in contempt. Project the emails." The screen changed. From Lena, redacted email, to Grant Holloway, redacted email. Subject, the house. "Grant, it's perfect. He's so deep in the bottle he'll believe anything. I found some old bank statements from her. We can spin this. We can use that new elder abuse law. We can say she did all this, that she confused him. We get the house back. Sell it at this new high price. We split the profit, 60-40. You get him to sign. I'll do the rest." A second email popped up. From Grant Holloway to Lena. Subject, the house. The strategy is sound. He's the perfect victim. We'll paint the daughter as a cold, entitled millennial. We can drag her name through the mud. By the time we're done, he'll be begging me to save him. We'll get the house, and we'll get paid. The courtroom exploded. It was not a murmur. It was a roar. My father, Elias, stared at the screen, his face white, his mouth slack with horror. He turned to Lena. Lena. But Lena was not looking at him. She was staring at her hands in her lap, her face the color of ash. Grant Holloway was frantically mopping his face with a handkerchief. The reversal was complete. The picture was no longer daughter scams father. It was father, blinded by his own ego, gets scammed by his new wife and her con artist lawyer, while the daughter he abused pays for everything. Judge Klein took off her glasses. She polished them, slowly, deliberately. She put them back on. She looked at Grant Holloway with a cold, pure loathing that could have frozen fire. Mr. Holloway, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Did you, at any point, intend to disclose to this court your direct, personal, and substantial financial interest in the successful sale of this property? Grant just gurgled. The judge turned away from him in disgust. Her eyes moved past Caleb. They found mine. For the first time, her expression was not impartial. It was not cold. It was human. The paper has spoken very clearly. Ms. Gates, she said, her voice echoing in the stunned, ringing silence. The numbers, the deeds, the emails, they all tell a very clear story. She paused. Now, all of that is in the record, but this is the moment your voice gets to be in the record, too. Not just your numbers. You have sat here. You have listened to your father call you a parasite. You have listened to these people plot against you. And you have listened to the men in that gallery, the men you are now staring at the backs of. Believe it. Her eyes held mine. So I ask you, Ms. Gates, is there anything you would like to say to this court, to your father, and to all the people who came here today to watch you fall? Caleb sat down. Judge Klein's words hung in the air, an invitation. My name had been spoken, but it felt as if she had called a stranger. Is there anything you would like to say? I did not move. I could not feel my hands. The entire room, the flannel army, the news camera, my father, Lena, Grant Holloway, all of it had compressed into a single, unbearable point of pressure. Caleb reached over and, without looking at me, gently nudged my briefcase on the floor, the one full of receipts. It was a prompt. Stand up. Speak. I pushed my chair back. The sound of its legs scraping on the floor was violent in the silence. I stood. I did not look at the judge. I did not look at the gallery. I turned and looked, for the first time, directly at my father. He was staring at the floor. He could not meet my eyes. I am not the thief, I said. My voice was not the voice I knew. It was low, cracked, and echoed in a way that seemed to come from outside me. It was the sound of a woman who had not slept in 7 years. Elias flinched. He looked up, his eyes bloodshot and full of a pathetic, bewildered terror. You called me a parasite, I said, my voice gaining a terrible, cold strength. You called me a thief, but I was not the thief. I was the one who signed every single transfer order. I was the one. I turned my head, just slightly, to look at Judge Klein. He asked why I was secret. Mr. Holloway asked why I did not just tell him. I looked back at my father. I will tell you why, because I did tell you. 7 years ago, when I found the foreclosure notice, I came to you. I sat you down in the den, and I showed you the balloon payment. I showed you the math. And you stood up, your face purple, and you pointed your finger at me. And you said, and these were your exact words, I would rather burn this house to the ground and sleep in the ashes than let you, with your goddamn spreadsheets, ever touch my finances. And then you threw me out. My father started shaking his head. No, I did not. I was drinking. You were. I agreed, my voice flat. But I believed you. I believed you would rather lose everything than accept help from the spreadsheet girl. So, I took you at your word. I agreed. I would not let Valentina Gates touch your finances. I just let her pay for them, in secret, so your pride would not be disturbed. I finally let my eyes sweep over the gallery, over the men who had whispered and pointed. Do you want to know what it costs to pay for a house you do not own? I will tell you. It costs 3 jobs. It costs 70-hour work weeks. It costs 80-hour work weeks. It costs living in a 400-square-foot studio in the suburbs while you are earning a 6-figure salary. It costs lying to your friends about why you cannot go to their weddings. It costs having a kind, decent man tell you he cannot date a ghost who is never present and always waiting for a bomb to go off at 2 or 3 in the morning. My voice started to shake, not with weakness, but with a pure, white-hot rage. It costs sitting in a dark car at 3:15 in the morning, your hands trembling so hard you cannot hit the confirm button as you transfer your entire paycheck, every cent, into an account that is not yours, to save a house for a man who calls you a disappointment at Christmas dinner. It costs over $480,000. It costs 7 years of your life. That, I said, my voice dropping, is the price, and I paid it in full. I turned. My gaze landed on Lena. She was trying to shrink into her chair, her eyes darting between me and the exit. And you, I said. She visibly flinched. You were right. I was hovering. I was sitting in my car, staring at the house, but I was not coveting it. I was running the numbers on my laptop, trying to figure out if I could sell my car to make the last $10,000 payment for the balloon. You looked at this house and you saw a gold mine. You saw $1 million asset to be stripped. I looked at it, and I saw my mother's kitchen. I saw the pencil marks on the doorframe. You were obsessed with the value. I was obsessed with the cost. I reached into my suit pocket. I pulled out a single, folded piece of paper. It was an email I had printed out that morning. Last night, I said, my voice softening for just a second, I got an email from my mother, Claire, the woman whose name you forged on a loan. I said to my father, the woman you erased from that house, she could not be here, but she gave me a message. She said, Valent, not an ATM. You are not an emotional blast shield for your father. You do not owe him this house, and you do not owe him your silence. I folded the paper and put it back in my pocket. She is right. My silence is over. Now I faced them, the flannel army, the men who had laughed at me, filmed me, judged me. They were all staring at their hands. I know you, I said, my voice cutting through the room. I know all of you. I see Mike Sullivan, who I helped restructure his invoices for free so he would not lose his company. I see Gary Alonzo, who I showed how to set up payroll so he would stop getting fined by the IRS. I did it, and I did it for free, because my father asked me to, because I am good with numbers. How many of you, I asked, my voice rising, are like him? How many of in this room have a son or a daughter who does a job you do not understand, a job you cannot touch or swing a hammer at, a job that happens on a keyboard? How many times have you dismissed them? How many times have you called their work not real work? A few men in the front row looked up, their faces pale. I am the consequence of that, I said. I am what happens when you tell a kid, over and over, that their skills are useless. They learn to use them, silently, defensively. They learn to build an arsenal instead of a bridge. You all came here today to watch a greedy daughter get what she deserved, and you got what you wanted. You just saw a father get the bill for 30 years of dismissal, and it costs $482,000. I turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I said, my voice now formal. My lawyer has all the documentation. I am not countersuing for the money. I am not suing him back. I heard my father let out a sob, a small, wet sound of relief. I was not finished. I do not want his money. I paid it. It is gone. I did it to save a memory. And I did. What I want, what I am formally requesting, is a permanent restraining order, a protective order." My father's head snapped up. "What, Val? No, you cannot." "It is not because I'm afraid of him, Your Honor," I said, looking at the judge. "He is not a physical threat. I am afraid of me. I am afraid that this man who is my father, has an addiction to self-destruction, and I have a lifelong, crippling addiction to rescuing him. It is an addiction that has cost me 7 years, my financial security, and my entire 30s, and I cannot do it anymore. The only way to stop me from trying to fix him again, the only way to stop him from coming to me the next time he is in trouble, is to have a legal, binding wall. I need this to save myself, from him, and from my own desperate hope that he would one day change." "Valentina, please," my father cried out. It was a real sound, a real guttural wail. I did not know. Lena, Grant, they told me. I was just so scared of losing everything, scared of being nothing." He was crying, his face red and blotchy. The picture of the strong patriarch completely dissolved. I looked at him. The rage was gone. All I felt was a cold, vast, empty exhaustion. "You did not lose everything, Dad," I said, my voice so quiet only the front rows could hear. "You did not lose the house. I paid for it. You did not lose your reputation. You set it on fire. You just lost one thing. You lost the right to use me as your financial and emotional punching bag." I looked at him, and that is a loss that is long, long overdue. I faced him fully. "I loved you. I spent 7 years trying to prove I was a real daughter, a real part of this family. I tried to speak your language. I tried to build something. I tried to save the one thing you said you loved. But love is not an unlimited credit line. Dad, every bank, even the bank of a desperate daughter, eventually has to stop lending. Every account has a limit. Today," I said, my voice final, "is the day the bank of Valentina Gates is closing your account. We are done." I turned away from him. In the gallery, I saw 2 women I did not even know, in the back row, openly weeping. Several of the men in flannel were just staring at their hands, as if seeing them for the first time. Gary Alonzo was quietly wiping his eyes. Judge Klein looked at me. She looked at my father, who was now just a sobbing, broken man. She looked at Lena and Grant, who were staring at the floor, already convicted. "This court," she said, her voice full of a weary, final authority, "has heard enough, legally. This is one of the emptiest and most malicious lawsuits I have ever had the displeasure of presiding over." She looked at Grant and Lena. "Morally," she said, her voice dropping, "it is a living, breathing, and tragic example of what happens when people confuse family with the right to exploit, when they confuse love with a line item on a ledger." She looked back at me. "Ms. Gates, you may sit down." I sat. My legs gave out, and I fell into the chair. The adrenaline was gone. I was just empty. And as I sat there, listening to the judge begin the formal, legal dismantling of my father's life, I felt a strange, cold sensation. It was the feeling of a foundation. I had just laid the first, solid, cold, and entirely necessary brick for a new life, a life that would not be built around saving him. It would be built around protecting me. Judge Klein's gavel came down. The sound was not a bang. It was a crack, like a breaking bone. It was the sound of a verdict, sharp and final. "This court," she declared, her voice resonating with absolute, cold authority, "finds that the plaintiff, Mr. Elias Gates, has brought this suit not only without merit, but with clear and malicious intent to defraud this court, to defame the defendant, and to abuse the legal protections intended for actual victims." She stared at Grant Holloway, who looked as if he was trying to physically shrink into his suit. "This entire lawsuit is dismissed, with prejudice." With prejudice, the 2 most beautiful words in the English language. It meant he could never, ever, bring this claim again. It was over. Forever. Furthermore, she continued, the plaintiff, Mr. Gates, will be held responsible for all associated costs of this frivolous and abusive litigation. That includes the defendant's full attorney's fees, all costs associated with her defense, and the professional fees of every expert witness who testified here today, including Ms. Ortiz from the bank and Mr. Cole from Northbridge. A collective gasp went up from the gallery. I knew what that meant. I knew what Caleb charged per hour. I knew what a senior bank vice president's expert witness fee was. He was not just broke. He was now indebted to me, or rather, to the people who had proven my case. The cost would be staggering. It was a debt he could never handle. Judge Klein was not finished. This court hereby affirms, for the permanent record, that Mr. Elias Gates has no legal claim, right, or title to the property at 17 Maplecrest Drive. The warranty deed, filed 2 years ago, is valid. The ownership of Ms. Valentina Gates is absolute. Any further attempt by Mr. Gates to litigate this matter, in this court or any other, will be summarily dismissed and treated as a willful abuse of the judicial system, punishable by the fullest extent of the law. She looked at me, her expression softening for just 1 second. And as to the defendant's request, the petition for a permanent restraining order is granted. Elias Gates is hereby ordered to stay 500 feet away from the person, residence, and place of work of Valentina Gates. He is not to contact her by any means, phone, email, text, or third party, without her express, prior, written consent. Any violation of this order will result in his immediate arrest. Court is adjourned. The gavel cracked again. It was done. The room exploded into motion. It felt like the air had rushed back in, suffocating. I just sat there, my hands still locked in my lap, until Caleb touched my arm. We can go, Valentina. I stood on legs that felt like jelly. We stepped out of the courtroom into the hallway. It was chaos. The flannel army was pouring out, but their demeanor had changed. The jeering, mocking energy of the morning was gone, replaced by a stunned, awkward silence. I saw Mike Sullivan, the man who had filmed me with such disgust. He was on his phone, his back to me, his voice sharp. Yeah, Jerry, listen, about that Harborline subcontract. No, I am out. I am out. I cannot. I do not care. I am not working with Elias Gates. I do not work with a man who sues the kid who paid his mortgage. Yeah, I am pulling my crew. We are done. He hung up, saw me watching, and his face went beet red. He just nodded once, a quick, shamefaced gesture, and hurried away. A few of the other men, the older ones, including Gary Alonzo, approached me cautiously, their hats in their hands. Ms. Gates, Gary said, his voice low. Valentina, we just wanted to say, we are sorry. We are sorry for what we said, for being here. He fooled us all. Another man chimed in, his eyes on the floor. What you did, paying all that, my God, kid, that was something. And Gary added, if you are ever, looking for new clients, you are really good with numbers. My books are a complete mess. He pulled out a worn business card. I took it. I took all 3 cards they offered. Thank you, I said, my voice still hoarse. I appreciate that. I am not taking on any new work today. Of course. God bless you, child. They retreated, their faces a mixture of respect and deep embarrassment. And then I saw him. My father was sitting on a hard wooden bench against the far wall. He was sitting exactly as I had seen him through the window 7 years ago. Slumped, small, and utterly broken. His expensive blue suit was rumpled. He was holding his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking with dry, silent sobs. He was a king with no castle, no army, and no legacy. I looked for Lena. She was standing about 30 feet away from him, not at his side, not touching him, She was on her phone, her thumb flying furiously across the screen, a look of cold, calculating panic on her face. She was already transferring assets, I was sure, calling her lawyer, protecting her own gold mine. My father must have felt my gaze. He slowly, painfully, lifted his head, his eyes, red and swollen, pleaded with me across the hallway. Valentina. He started to get up, to take a step toward me. "Sir," the bailiff by the door barked, his hand on his sidearm. "You want to go back in front of the judge? You heard her. 500 feet. Back. Up. Now." Elias froze, 1 foot off the ground. A man stranded. He looked from the bailiff back to me. He looked at Lena, a desperate, final appeal. "Lena, baby. They are... help me." Lena glanced up from her phone, her eyes like chips of ice. She looked at him, then at me, then at the contractors walking away in disgust. She saw the sinking ship. She pressed send on whatever message she was writing, shoved her phone in her purse, and, without a single word to the man she had married, turned and walked fast, click-clacking on her heels, toward the elevator. "Lena!" he screamed, a raw, terrified sound. She never looked back. One of the men who had apologized to me muttered, "Saw her outside before the hearing. She had a taxi waiting. Guess she's gone." Elias Gates watched his new life, his legacy, get into the elevator and disappear. He collapsed back onto the bench, a hollow, empty shell. "Valentina." Caleb's voice cut through the fog. He was holding out a thick, certified copy of the judgment. On top of it, he placed the certified copy of the warranty deed. "This," he said, tapping the judgment, "is the restraining order. It is your shield. And this," he tapped the deed, "is the title. It is your proof. It is done." He looked at me, a rare, small smile touching his lips. "You know, for years, you have been the one saving everyone else's company. You have been the one fixing their blueprints when they were already half-built and collapsing." He paused. "From now on, every blueprint you draw for your own life, you do not have to draw it around the name Elias Gates." I took the papers. They were heavy. I put them in my briefcase, on top of the 7 years of receipts. "Let's go," he said. We walked to the elevators. We rode down in silence. When the elevator doors opened onto the main lobby, the local news camera swiveled toward me. The reporter from that morning, the one who had spoken of elder abuse, rushed forward, a microphone in his hand. Ms. Gates, a stunning reversal. Your father. Do you have any comment on the ruling?" I looked at him, I looked at the camera, and I just walked right past him. I had said everything I needed to say in the courtroom. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the courthouse. The late afternoon sun hit me so hard it made me dizzy. It was bright and warm, and it was over. I walked down the concrete steps. The men from the charter buses, the ones who had jeered at me, were all gone. The circus had packed up and left. The only people left were a few curious onlookers, who now looked at me not with contempt, but with a new, quiet respect. They parted, making a path. I was no longer the villain. I was just the survivor. I did not go back to my studio. I drove straight to Maple Crest Drive. I did not park on the street, like a ghost or a visitor. I pulled into the driveway. My tires crunched on the gravel. It was dusk. I sat in the car for a long time. I got out. I went to the trunk, and I took out a small, white paint pen I had bought at an office supply store 3 days ago. I walked to the end of the driveway. The mailbox, the black, metal box my father had erected, was still there. The faded, peeling vinyl letters on the side read, "The Gates Family." A lie. It had been Elias and his disappointment, then Elias and his parasite, then Elias and his gold mine. It had never been a family. I stood there for a long time in the cool evening air. Then, I uncapped the pen. I pressed its tip against the metal, and I started to write, in my own neat, careful, all-caps script, right over the faded vinyl. I wrote, Gates, and then, next to it, Valentina. It was the first time my name had ever been on the house. Not his name, not a generic, false family mine. It looks good. I jumped, startled. My mother was standing on the porch, a small duffel bag at her feet. Mom, I breathed. How did you know? Caleb called me, she said, walking down the steps. She came to the mailbox and touched the still tacky paint. He told me the verdict. She looked at me, her eyes shining in the twilight. I came to get you. I thought you would be at your apartment, but this is better. She did not let me finish. She just pulled me into her arms. I stood there, by my mailbox, with my name on it, and I let my mother hold me. I felt the tension of 7 years, of 33 years, finally, begin to unspool. You did it, Valentina, she whispered, her voice thick. All those years, balancing his books, saving his company, saving this house. I was always proud, but this time. She pulled back, her hands on my shoulders, and looked me right in the eyes. This time, you did not save him. You did not save his company. You saved yourself. You drew the line. I am more proud of that than any number you ever balanced. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was going insane. Emails from new clients. Heard you are the best. A LinkedIn message from a podcast. Would love to interview you about financial abuse. Dozens of texts from old colleagues, friends, my old college roommate. I saw the news. You are a rock star. The noise, the validation, all the things I had craved for so long. I looked at the buzzing, vibrating screen. All of these people suddenly wanting a piece of me. I pressed the button on the side. The screen went dark. Not tonight, I said. Tonight, the only thing I wanted was peace. I walked inside. The house was cold, stale. Lena had taken her perfumes, but the house still smelled of her sterile, gray paint. I walked into the living room. On the main wall, there had always been a large framed photograph of my father, Elias, standing in front of his very first construction project, a look of young, arrogant pride on his face. It was gone. Lena must have taken it. All that was left was a large, empty, whitish square on the wall, marked by a single, naked picture hook, a blank space. I stared at it. I could put up a mirror, a painting. I could hang my own accomplishments there. I decided, for now, to just leave it, a blank space, an empty wall. It was not an ending. It was just the next chapter, not yet written. I walked into the kitchen that had been my mother's, the one I had saved. It was dark. I did not turn on the overhead light. I just went to the sink and turned on the tap. I just stood there, in the dark, listening to the sound of the water running. It was a clean, steady, peaceful sound. It was not the sound of my father yelling about invoices. It was not the sound of Lena hissing about gold mines. It was not the sound of me, at 3 a.m, crying over a bank transfer. It was just water. I leaned back against the counter, the cool laminate pressing against my spine. I closed my eyes and took a breath, a real one, deep, all the way into my lungs, without a knot of anxiety in the middle of it. I thought, finally, it is finally over. The house does not belong to the man who built it. It does not belong to the woman who tried to steal it. It belongs to the one who actually paid for it. And for the first time, it belongs to the one who is willing to live differently inside it. I reached over and turned off the water. The kitchen went silent, and I just stood there in the dark, in my house. Thank you all so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you are listening from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Make sure you subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.